All right, welcome back to another episode of Science with Surback. Today what we're going to be talking about is colloids. And before we get into the details of notes, I just want to outline the objective we have for this lesson. So our objective is for you to be able to describe how a colloid differs from a true solution and the different varieties and types of colloids. So we start out here with colloids, and we get to the definition. So colloids are defined as mixtures containing particles larger than normal solutes, but small enough to remain suspended in the dispersing medium. Now these colloids can be any state of matter, so they can be solids, liquids, or gases. Now, to help get you the idea of some of these different types of colloids, I have a few examples. My first example that I have of a colloid is known as an aerosol. And an aerosol is going to be something like fog or smoke in the air. Okay, so you kind of get that hazy look, and what happens here, if you think about fog or smoke, you have those particles, and they are suspended in your dispersing medium, the air, and you create that colloid. Now, another example that we have is something that's known as a foam. Okay, so in something like a foam, we have the example of whipped cream, right? Where you have those sugar particles placed in the solution, not the solution, but placed in a way that you have a colloid. Now, the other thing that we need to distinguish is, okay, yes, this is a colloid, but we just got talking about with solutions. So how do colloids differ from solutions? So a colloid has particles that are between 5 and 1,000 nanometers in diameter. And then a solution has solutes that are less than 5 nanometers in diameter. Now, we also need to talk about the different types of colloids, not solids. So the first type of colloid is an aerosol. The second type of colloid is a foam. And the third type of colloid is an emulsion. And each of these types of colloids have specific examples that we'll discuss a little bit later. What I want to talk about now is a certain type of property that occurs with our colloids. So this type of property is known as the Tyndall Effect. And the Tyndall Effect is defined as the ability of a colloidal particle to scatter light. And now, if you have the Tyndall Effect occurring, most of these colloids here that produce the Tyndall Effect are going to be ones that are cloudy or opaque. Now, specifically, the Tyndall Effect occurs when a path of a beam of light projected through the colloidal suspension can be seen through the suspension. Okay, so to really see this and understand this, I have a little demonstration set up. So I'm going to set my notes out to the side, and I'm going to readjust the camera so that way I can see two things. So in this particular example right here, I have just a regular beaker full of tap water. And what happens here is if I take my laser pointer here, right, it just shines a beam of light. What happens here is this, all right? I'm gonna shift it towards something that will show that beam of light. But what happens here is I'm just gonna shine my beam of light, and you can't see it right now, but I'm going to shine my beam of light through this particular beaker of water. And over here, I'm going to set a paper towel, and you can see it's very faint here on the TV. Oh, there it is. But see how the light goes straight through this particular beaker of water? Well, the Tyndall effect is not occurring because the light is not scattering. Now let's try it with an actual colloid suspension. So right here, what I have is just a beaker of coffee creamer, and I filled it up with water, and you can see that it has that opaque, almost milk-like appearance. And this would be defined as a colloid. Those actual coffee creamer particles are a little bit bigger than that of a solute in a solution, so this constitutes a colloid. And then I'm going to do the same thing, right? I'm going to drop my white paper towel back here, and I am going to shine or try to shine my beam of light. Okay, so I'm shining it through right now. I have my beam of light on, and there is no light coming through. The reason that there's no light coming through is that all of the particles of light from my red laser pointer have scattered into our colloid. Now, let me see here if I can zoom in a little bit here and get acquainted with what we have here. So, if we may be able to see it, oh, there we go. Okay, so perfect. All right, I have the laser a little bit above the colloid, so it is going through. Now, as I place it into the colloid, you can kind of see this bright red glare occur here. And if you are in person here, what's happening is the light from the laser pointer is scattering, and that is known as the Tyndall effect. It scatters that light. So again, you can kind of see that red ring there. That light from the laser pointer is scattering. Okay, so what we'll do here, we'll shift back and we'll talk a little bit more about the Tyndall effect and some other examples besides what we just did in our set of notes. So the Tyndall effect can explain the following. One of the things that it can explain is sunlight being seen through a forest canopy. And so if you've ever been in the woods or the forest, what you notice here is as the light passes through that forest canopy, the light seems to scatter in a bunch of different pieces, and you can almost see a spotlight from that scattering of that light. Well, what's happening here? The air has colloid dust particles, and as the light hits the air, the light is going to scatter and appear in that way, or be shown where that sunlight can be seen through the canopy. Another example here is the colors in the sunset. So I want to get into a little bit more detail of why we see those colors in the sunset. So the reason that we see it, one of two reasons right here, is that air that contains dust, smoke, or other particles of colloidal size. These colloids, these colloidal particles, cause wavelengths from the sun to scatter to different extents. Now, as a wavelength scatters to different wavelengths, or as light scatters to different wavelengths, what happens is you see different colors, and that's why you see those pretty sunsets occur there. It's all because the air in Earth's atmosphere has those colloidal particles and forms a colloid in air. Now we need to talk about two other colloids that we have, and the first of these colloids is known as a hydrophilic colloid. Now, these are defined as water-loving colloids. Now, we need to talk a little bit about the structure of these colloids. So number one, they're going to fold up, so the hydrophobic groups are inside the structures and away from the water. And then they have hydrophilic, the water-loving part. Those groups are on the surface of the molecules so that they can interact with the water molecule, which is acting as the solvent. And so some good example of hydrophilic colloids are some large biological molecules. Now on the flip side, we also have hydrophobic colloids, and these are defined as water-hating colloids. Now hydrophobic colloids must be stabilized in water, and this can be done through absorption of ions on their surface. Now, this term absorption occurs when something sticks to a surface. So a great example of a hydrophobic colloid is when soap removes dirt. All right, so we mentioned that colloids are suspended in that solvent. So if they're suspended, there has to be some way that we can remove those colloidal particles. So how we remove colloids is a couple different ways. The first method is known as coagulation. And coagulation is defined as an enlargement of colloidal particles until they can be removed by filtrations. And so there's a couple different methods of producing or causing coagulation. The first method is by heating. And so what heating does is it causes an increase in the number of collisions, which results in particles, those colloidal particles, sticking to each other when they collide. Now you could also add an electrolyte. And so an electrolyte, remember that ionic compound there, what it's going to do is it's going to neutralize the surface charges on the colloidal particles. Now, the second method to remove a colloid particle is known as dialysis. And dialysis is defined as a semi-permeable membrane that is used to separate ions from colloidal particles. And the whole function of dialysis is to remove colloidal waste particles from blood. Now, normally that's the function of the kidneys. And so if you have kidney problems, someone goes on dialysis, and that dialysis process removes those pieces or parts or those colloidal particles from the blood. All right, so this concludes another episode of Science with Surbeck. It actually concludes the whole unit on solutions. So I hope you have enjoyed, and as always, if you have not subscribed, make sure you get on that.